For 50 years, a 73-year-old farmer quietly kept the landing field lit for the military. No praise, no pay, just loyalty. Until one day, a tech giant tried to erase it all with a single eviction notice. It seemed like the end. But then, a handwritten wooden sign caught the attention of the Pentagon. And overnight, the sound of chopper blades returned, not for training, but to stand with him. What happened next? And why did an entire community rise up for one farmer? Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's story. Let's dive into this powerful, true story. At 73, Walter McKinley had spent his entire life tending the same 1,000 acres his grandfather first plowed after World War II. For decades, McKinley Farm had been more than a place to grow corn. It had quietly served as a night training ground for military helicopters. Rain or shine, Walter and his wife, Elaine, kept the south field cleared and lit, always ready to support the young pilots flying in from the nearby base. Elaine made coffee and sandwiches. Walter radioed landing coordinates like clockwork. It was their way of giving back. But when a tech company from California bought the surrounding properties, the land's meaning didn't matter. They wanted his fields for a gleaming new campus. We're offering more than fair market value, they told Walter, waving paperwork. But you can't put a price on 50 years of loyalty. The final eviction notice arrived quietly, like betrayal in an envelope. Walter, hands shaking, put up a handmade sign. Training zone closing. Thank you for 50 years of service. He didn't expect anyone to notice, but someone did. That small sign, nailed into old wood, made its way through military forums like wildfire. And somewhere in Washington, a high-ranking officer made a call that would turn Walter's world upside down, in the best way possible. The next morning, the sound of helicopter blades shook the valley, not for training, but for him. Walter never stopped maintaining the landing zone, even when no one else seemed to care. Every week, without fail, the 73-year-old farmer walked his south field, checking lights, clearing debris, and ensuring the path was ready for military helicopters. It was the same routine his father followed during the Cold War and his grandfather before him in the 1940s. Generations of McKinleys had quietly supported the U.S. military, offering their land for nighttime helicopter training missions. While other farms transitioned to high-tech agriculture or sold out to big developers, Walter kept things simple and patriotic. He never asked for money, never made a fuss. His late wife Elaine used to say, "You can't expect these young service boys to train on empty stomachs." She makes sandwiches, brew hot coffee, and welcome each crew like family. Their modest kitchen had become an unofficial rest stop for pilots. But as suburban development crept closer, the newer landowners didn't understand. To them, Walter's field wasn't a training ground. It was a missed opportunity for luxury homes and profit. One by one, nearby families sold out. The Wilsons, the Montgomerys, all gone. Still, Walter stood firm. Not for money, but for duty. His field had seen generations of pilots rise from rookies to heroes. To Walter, letting that go wasn't just giving up land. It was abandoning tradition. And even when no helicopters came, he still lit the field every night, just in case they needed him. Walter sat quietly at his kitchen table, eviction notice in hand, staring at the paper like it might suddenly change its mind. For over 5 decades, this land had been more than soil and crops. It had been a silent partner to the U.S. military, a training ground for countless pilots. His grandfather offered up during World War II. His father maintained it through Vietnam. Walter had kept the lights burning through every conflict since. But now, all of that heritage was being wiped away with a developer's signature. TechCore Incorporated, a tech giant from California, had bought up the neighboring properties, eager to build a sprawling corporate campus. Walter's family farm sat right in the center of their blueprint. To them, it was just a logistical inconvenience. To Walter, it was his life's work, his family's legacy, and a living monument to American service. He thought about the young airmen who'd learned to land in foggy darkness, the ones who had come back just to say thank you. He remembered Elaine's quiet pride as she handed out sandwiches at midnight, the coffee pot never empty. Now, that was all about to vanish. That afternoon, Walter nailed a wooden sign into the fence line. Military Training Zone, closing after 50 years. Thank you for your service. He didn't call the military. He didn't start a protest. He just lit the field one more time, because someone had to. Just as Walter finished feeding the chickens that next morning, a deep, thunderous hum filled the crisp country air. He looked up, shielding his eyes from the sun, as an Apache helicopter roared over the tree line, followed by not one, but 3 Black Hawks. They weren't the usual training crews. These bore the unmistakable markings of the Pentagon's own fleet. As the helicopters descended onto his field, kicking up clouds of dust and memories, Walter stood frozen. 2 generals stepped out, briefcases in hand, walking with purpose toward the farmhouse. Elaine met them on the porch with coffee already brewing. It was what she did, what she had always done for the young men and women who trained here. At the kitchen table, amid decades-old photo frames and the faint smell of fresh cornbread, the generals laid out a proposal. The Anderson farm would be federally designated as a protected military training zone. The land would no longer be at the mercy of developers or zoning boards. In fact, the military would lease the landing fields, providing stable income to keep the farm alive and untouched. Walter's hands trembled as he signed the papers. He had expected to lose everything. But now, his family's sacrifice and service were not only being acknowledged, they were being safeguarded for generations to come. Sometimes he thought, loyalty still does mean something in this country. While Walter was still trying to absorb the surreal visit from the generals, another set of boots stepped onto the land that developers once claimed. That same day, military officers marched directly into the sleek glass offices of Apex Horizons, the tech company determined to pave over his legacy. No pleasantries, no corporate lingo, just a stack of official documents stamped with authority no amount of money could outbid. One executive began to object, citing long-standing development plans and zoning approvals. But the general's reply was firm and final. Your project has been superseded by national security interests. The room went silent. All the boardroom confidence drained from their faces. With a few signatures and one ironclad federal order, the narrative had flipped. Walter's fields were no longer in the way. They were essential. And it didn't stop there. The military made rounds across the region, protecting every neighboring farm that had once served as auxiliary training zones. The Montgomery pasture? Saved. The Wilson family's emergency landing strip? Secured. It was like watching the roots of service and sacrifice get watered after a long drought. By sundown, phones were ringing across the valley. Farmers who once feared foreclosure were now part of a federally recognized support system. Walter stood at the edge of his field, gazing at the same soil he'd walked for 50 years, and knew this land wasn't just spared. It was honored. Today, McKinley Farm stands prouder than ever, a beacon of quiet resilience and generational service. The old dirt landing zones, once at risk of being bulldozed, now hum with life, more active than they've been in decades. Helicopters from nearby bases fly regular training runs, touching down on fields where Jackson's father once walked with a lantern, guiding pilots through foggy night drills. But this time, he's not doing it alone. His grandson, Caleb, barely 16 but already tall enough to wear his grandfather's boots, walks the rows with him, learning not just how to till soil or fix broken gates, but how to stand up for something bigger than yourself. They work side by side, maintaining every marker, every light, every square inch of that sacred patch. Inside the farmhouse, Elaine still brews hot coffee for the pilots. She packs sandwiches like she used to in the 70s, labeled in marker with "Thank you for your service." And just like always, Walter stays up for night landings, standing by the radio with steady hands and tired eyes, saying the same thing he said for over 40 years. Can't expect our boys to learn in daylight only. For those who drive past the land now, they might just see open fields. But for anyone who's ever touched down on Jackson soil, it's hallowed ground, where patriotism isn't a word, but a daily ritual. When folks ask Walter McKinley about the day everything changed, he just gives a quiet smile and gestures toward the barn, where an old closing notice sign now hangs like a battle scar turned badge of honor. He doesn't talk much about the phone call from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs or the sight of generals stepping out of helicopters on his front lawn. He'd rather show them the freshly repainted landing markers, the buzzing practice drills overhead, or let them meet his grandson, Caleb, now learning the ropes of maintaining a military training field with the same devotion passed down through 4 generations. What happened that day wasn't just about saving a plot of land. It was a moment that turned the tide for an entire farming community. Walter's neighbors, who had already packed up or considered selling, suddenly found hope. Military protections extended beyond his fences. Rest stops, emergency landing zones, and night drill fields up and down the county line were reinstated and defended, not by protest, but by the kind of loyalty that doesn't get erased by zoning laws. Walter never thought he'd live to see his quiet acts of patriotism honored so publicly. But he did. And now, when helicopters rumble across the skies and young pilots tip their wings in thanks, Walter simply tips his hat back and whispers, "They came back for us." As the sun dipped low behind the silo at McKinley Ridge Farm, Walter stood quietly beside his grandson, Caleb, watching the sky ripple with rotor blades once again. The drills were louder now, more frequent, with more young pilots depending on the land his family had protected for generations. And though his knees weren't what they used to be, Walter still insisted on placing the landing lights himself, just like his father and grandfather had done before him. Nearby, Elaine handed out sandwiches and coffee to the flight crews, still homemade, still warm, still stitched with care. What they nearly lost wasn't just acreage, it was the soul of service. But sometimes, all it takes is one voice, one handwritten sign, one stubborn man refusing to be forgotten, to remind the country what loyalty looks like. Walter never sought recognition. He simply believed that supporting those who serve wasn't a duty, it was a privilege. Sometimes, the quietest forms of service make the loudest impact. In a world chasing progress, don't forget the traditions that shaped it. Loyalty, sacrifice, and purpose, these don't come with a price tag. If this story moved you, leave a comment below about someone in your life who served with quiet strength. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss stories that honor the heart of America.